Not all consulting assignment leads to implementation or execution. It is not until when you have solved the problem that you have done consulting. By simply advising the client on how and why they got to where they are is consulting advisory. That is consulting. Beyond that, advising the clients of where they are, in any case, you can't even do solution. You can't come up with solution without the first part, which is consulting advisory. And then you can't do the implementation without the middle part, which is the solution. What are you implementing if you don't have solutions the client has chosen? So consulting is not implementation alone. So if you are basing your consultancy on always solving a problem, you are leaving money on the table. You are leaving money on the table. Having said that, if you're going to do the three, you probably earn a lot more. You're going to do advisory on a particular, advise a client on a particular problem, come up with solutions and deliver solutions and implement the solution, you make a lot more money. But what if the client doesn't want the solution, just wants to understand what the issues are? Don't leave money on the table, okay? So types of consultancy, most consultancies, we're managing and strategy. We're managing and coming up with strategy. So I mean, you may say my business is not here, my area is not here. The consultancy you're offering is operations, operational and processes. You're looking at processes, you're looking at the operations. For those in HR, you're looking at human capital. For those in finance, you're looking at financial and risk management, IT and digital and specialist consulting. So there are lots of specialist consulting, but most times specialist consulting or your area is looking at operations. How are things done? What are the processes? Can we review the processes? Can we be processes more effective? Those are the kind of consulting that we have. Now, consulting business models. How do you deliver? How do you sell your consultancy? Most consultancy are project-based. Project-based in the sense that the assignment has a start and a finish. A start and an end. It's called project-based consultancy. Now, even though it has a start and end, the assignment can be on a the consultancy can be on a retainer basis. So perhaps I'm retained as a consultant for a particular client, but every project I do every assignment that I do for the client is on a project by project basis, even though I'm on a retainer. So I'm retained as their consultant, whether you're a legal consultant or they're a financial consultant, you do assignments based on projects. Don't get involved in business as usual. Then you become an employee. So even though you're on a retainer basis, they consult you, you are still independent of the company. And every assignment that you do is individual assignments based on each project. Then there's what we call advisory and fractional consulting, which is what I just explained. Advisory or fractional. Advisory in the sense that we just advise them, or is a fraction of consulting. So essentially, there are three types of consulting solutions: advisory, solutions, and implementation or execution. So fractional is if you're asked to do advisory or you're asked to come up with a solution. Full consulting is diagnostics and implementation consulting. That's full consulting. When the client says, look, I want to get to the root cause and I want to solve this problem. That's diagnostics and implementation consulting. The client says, look, I need to understand why we are where we are and how can we give us ideas of solutions, what we can do. That is advisory or fractional consulting. So these are different models you can adopt on how you deliver services to clients, depending on your industry. When we get to part 2, we'll be able to advise you what is more appropriate for what you want to do. So how do we create value? Remember, someone employs you as a consultant because they want to derive value. They want a value. In fact, value is they want a problem solved, or they want to achieve a goal, or they want to improve performance. That's the value they're looking to get. So when we say creating value, you are helping a client to basically to achieve any of those things. Let them see what they have not been able to see internally. That is providing an external perspective. Bring a proven framework that works to solve a problem. Again, when we come to methodologies, we look at different frameworks. There are a lot of frameworks out there. You can bring those frameworks to bear under circumstances because these are proven frameworks that work, that are worked elsewhere. They don't have access or an ability to understand this framework. So you are bringing it. So you are adding to them. When you add to a client, you are adding value. You are creating value. When you add to a client, you are creating value. And that's why I said earlier, don't leave a client worse off. You must always add value. And then finally, how do you reduce risk and get result? How do you get result for a client? The client would measure you by results. By result. A client will measure you by results. And this is very important. I did some work for, I think UBA is a global bank in Africa now. I did a work for them a couple of years ago. The money was good. I've written about it. I met the CEO on a plane and was able to sell to him. And we did the work, fantastic, good revenue. And then the following year, I went back to UBA Africa, the bank, and says, let's do what we did last year, let's do it again. And they said no. And I was shocked. And I began to understand why. That the reason why they did not renew the contract the following year was because my results, according to them, was not sustainable. My result was not sustainable. I started off in consulting in the recruitment space. So I was bringing in Africans from the diaspora back to Africa. And that's what I did largely. Now, that's my pedigree in consulting. So this particular year, took UBA and a few other companies to America to recruit professionals, banking professionals. And then they recruited them. Within 6 months, the banking professionals that were recruited all went back to the USA, went back to America. So, I mean, they were recruited for long-term employment. Within 6 months, they left and went back to America. So the following year, I went back to them, let's do this thing again. I said, no, the people that you recruited have all gone back. Now, was it my fault that they went back? I don't think so. But the fact that they didn't stay affected my ability to renew the contract. And so we learned a lesson, and I'm going to pass the lesson on to you. You're as good as your last assignment. Sustainability is key. So when you are implementing a consulting assignment, think sustainability. The results I am getting, how sustainable is it into the long term? You are only as good as your last assignment. Okay? Sustainability is key. So anytime you're implementing a consulting assignment, you know, the fact that the consulting assignment is 12 months, after 12 months, you finish, everything looks okay, everything works well. In terms of a project, you have succeeded as a project manager. But in terms of a consultant, in terms of change management, if after 12 months everything falls apart, or after 12 months you succeed in the assignment, and 3 months down the line, everything falls apart, in consulting, that's a failure. So there's a burden on us as consultants, especially emerging consultants. Don't just think about project delivery. Let me just deliver the assignment. Once I deliver the assignment, and I'm done. No. If you want to succeed in consulting, you got to think about sustainability. How sustainable is the result, is the solution I am providing for my clients? How sustainable? So that's the question we must always ask ourselves. And so when we are doing this training, we're thinking about sustainability. I don't want to just train you to become consultants. I want you to become successful consultant. That's sustainability. So when we start talking about training you and developing your own product and marketing it and positioning you, we are setting you up for success. Besides just training. I mean, we could do this training and simply teach you what consulting is. Whether you succeed or not, you're on your own. But no, we are thinking more about sustainable. How can I train you in such a way that you succeed as a consultant? So sustainability is key. If you have that mentality, you will succeed in consulting or you succeed as a consultant. That's creating lasting value. Creating lasting value. So consulting as problem solving, we've talked about this. Structured analysis, practical solutions, professional delivery. These are very, very key. So as a consultant, you must always think about these three things. structured analysis. How did the clients arrive at where they are? This is what may have led to this. This is what you didn't do. This is what you did. So you look at the pattern and then you provide analysis to the client. And your analysis is validated by data. It's not just guesswork. Okay. And then secondly, you come up with practical solutions. This is the way out. And this is the solutions are if the client asks for solutions. If all they've asked you for is how do we arrive at where we are, all you need to give them is structured analysis. How did we arrive at that we are and how do we get out? Then you're talking about solutions. How do we implement and get the result that we need? You are looking at delivery. You are looking at solutions. Okay? All right. So, finally, in terms of our business case, this is the approach. A growing retail business experiencing a declining sale despite increased marketing spend. The owner approaches you, a consultant, to seek clarity and solution. How the consulting process starts. You begin the meeting, and this is critical. Once a client gives you a brief, ask for a meeting. We call it client engagement session. Client engagement, client validation, client clarification. You ask for a meeting to understand their goals. What do you want to achieve? What are your concerns? Let's understand the current situation. What do you want to achieve? What will success look like? There's a form that we use to capture that. And again, you have that form. And it's called the client engagement form. The client engagement form, where you ask a series of questions to get a snapshot of where the client is, why they are there. That's the first thing. So you clarify the problem in order to separate symptoms from root cause. And then you agree the scope of the engagement. Now, let me give you a tip in consulting. And why somebody might say, in this day and age of IT and digital, once the client gives you assignment, you can simply go ahead. Fine, you can do that. But in all my years of experience, once you have a client engagement session, you realize that the scope is larger than what the client has given you originally. And when you realize the scope is larger, you're able to charge more. Now, if you don't have this client engagement session, you will miss out the opportunity to charge adequately for the assignment. So your client engagement session, besides being a clarifying session, also enables you to get a proper scope of the assignment and to charge well. The wrongest thing, if there's any such word, is after you have given a client a price to go back and say, when you start the assignment, oh, the scope is bigger than I thought. Can we increase the fees? You can't do that. It is not professional. So it's always best to get the clear scope of the assignment, and you get that from your client's engagement session. So once you've done all that, then you can now have an approach to analyze the business and identify the real issues that is driving this decline. You now present these real issues to the client. These are the real issues. So a clearly defined problem statement, and then you agree next steps in terms of solution design. Okay? So, yeah, that's that. So I'm going to give you an assessment, and this is due next week. It's a reflective assignment. Understanding consulting value. That's the assignment. 100 pages, understanding consulting value. What does consulting mean to you? What does it mean to you? And then describe how you as a consultant can create value. What does consulting mean to you? And when we talk about value creation, what does it mean as a consultant? When we talk about value creation. Okay, that's my presentation for today. I'm just going to review what we looked at today, so that before we go, so that then we have a recap. This is a recap, and then I'll take some questions and then comments before we go. So for today, remember there are 8 weeks of this, 8 weeks of looking at. Week 1 is problem. Week 2 is looking at consulting processes. Week 3 is looking at, week 3 and 4, I think, is looking at consulting products. Then we look at consulting positioning. Then we look at provisioning and performance. For the next 2 weeks, this week and next week, we're looking at consulting problem. Okay, we're looking at consulting problem. And what we have tried to achieve today is to have a general understanding of what consulting is, to have an overview of what is consulting. That's what we have tried to achieve today. And then to understand how we can create value. That has been our objective for today. Now, the other thing that we set out to look for is we looked at the business case, even though it may be very high level. But one of the things I want to try and understand is, maybe take away from this is, once a client comes with a problem, number one, don't take it at face value and simply, okay, so let me backtrack. Most times when clients come to us with a problem, they are always coming up, not just the problem, but what they want us to do. Now, a good consultant would say, fine, I have had you, but I need to validate what the problem is. Otherwise, if you build on what the client has told you, and that is not the root cause, you are building the wrong foundation. And trust me, the client will blame you if your solution does not succeed, even though you are implementing the solution they have recommended. So the lesson to take away from that is validate whatever the client has asked you to do. Now, let me warn you, clients don't like it. In fact, I once had a client say to me, oh, this is your validation. You want to extend the assignment. You want to make more money. And I said to the client, sir, yes, I'll probably make more money, but I'll save you more money in the long run because we will be dealing with the exact problem, not just the root cause. So it's easy to see, oh, the root cause as what to deal with. No, don't focus on the root cause. You're focusing on the wrong, don't focus on the symptoms. The symptoms are what we see, but what is causing what you see is deep-rooted. You need to identify what is causing that. And in dealing with that, you are dealing with the root cause. You are likely to be successful in solving the problem. Another key thing I mentioned about today is that consulting is not when you have solved the problem. Depending what the client has asked you for, and don't do what I call over syllabus. Don't go beyond what the client is asking for. I won't pay beyond what I have asked you to do or what I want. If all I want is to understand how we arrived at where we are, just advise me. Mr. Shola, this is what you did, this is what you didn't do, and that's called consulting advisory. And charge for that, charge me for that, and that ends. Don't go into the range of solutions to the problem if the client has not asked for it. It's over syllabus. Don't do it. I will not pay for what I have not asked for. Okay? So even when you are doing consulting proposals, be careful. Base your proposals on those three dimensions. Advisory, if you want us to do advice, this is it. If you want us to provide solutions, this is what it's going to cost you. If you want us to implement the solution, this is what it will cost you. Of course, you will charge on an incremental scale. You do more work in solutioning than advisory, and then even much more work when you are doing the implementation. Always bear that in mind. Okay? So one more thing, and then I can bring this to a close. In terms of models, always remember this. Deliver your assignment as projects, whether you're on a retainer basis or fractional consulting, or you are doing end-to-end. How do we create value? We're creating value as a consultant by taking the clients from where they are to where they want to go, or where they ought to be. In fact, that's another realms of teaching. Some people know where they want to go. Some clients may not know where potentially they can be. And this is where you create value as a consultant. Okay, so you have a client consultant who's earning $10,000. Guess what? They can earn $50,000, but they don't know. So how you can add value is by showing them how they can increase their revenue. Okay, adding value, how they can reduce wastage, how they can perform better. This is how to create value for your clients. Okay. All right. So any questions? Any questions? Thank you very much for listening. I know I've spoken a lot today, usually that on the first day, but subsequently I'll make it more interactive when we're looking at business case studies. But I needed to lay this foundation today.